You may be wondering why I'm not socially distanced with this lady that's sitting next to me, but this beautiful lady is my wife, Brooke. And so I want to have a conversation with her about what we've been talking about today. And I'm going to quote my wife. One of the things that she says is that we often judge other people's outsides by our insides. And this is something I've often heard her talk about. And I'm bringing this up because I think a lot of times we don't realize that when somebody is looking beautiful or looks like they have their act together, that they actually are struggling deep down inside, or that they have been through difficult things. And would you speak to what that quote means to you?
Yeah, well, first I'm going to fix the quote.
Okay.
Because really what I always say is we compare our insides to other people's outsides. And what I think happens is that we really do a fabulous job of projecting a certain image to the world. And it can look polished and beautiful and together, and yet underneath, it can be really messy. And I feel like that I did that for a really long time. I knew how to answer theological questions. I knew how to be the priest's wife. I knew how to look like the good mom, and I put on a good performance for a really long time. And nobody knew really what was happening in my heart, that inside, while I might have known the Lord really well with my head, my heart just didn't really understand him. It didn't understand his love, his care, his compassion, and I had a lot of things bottled up inside of me. And so while everybody saw a certain image of me, they actually really didn't know me.
Right.
And that's kind of a painful place to be, actually.
And don't you think that because we make that judgment about other people, that's one of the main reasons why we keep bottled up in ourselves? You know, we compare and we say, they seem to have their life together, so I'm not going to share my burdens or become too vulnerable. It doesn't seem safe. And then we get isolated in our sadness or our griefs or our despairs. And that's not healthy.
Yeah, I think actually the main isolation comes because we believe the lie that we're the only one. You know, because everybody else looks so good, and because their performance is so believable, there's this lie that we hear of, you're the only one who's struggling like this. And that's actually what causes the isolation, is because of believing that lie.
One of the things that we're talking about today is how prayer actually can be very helpful to help us move out of that isolation. I mean, even if we don't have the help of other people, we still have that relationship with God. And so I'll just ask you, do you think it's okay to be angry at God in prayers, to express? Because I've heard as a pastor, a lot of people don't feel comfortable expressing anger at God.
Yeah, you're asking the right person, because I really took on a burden that I wasn't supposed to bear. I felt like I had to be this perfect Christian. I felt like I had to come to God perfectly, that I had to come to other people perfectly. And something that revolutionized my life was a book, and it was called Cry of the Soul by Dan Allender. And Dan Allender actually goes through the Psalms of Lament. And in those Psalms of Lament, you see anger, you see brokenness, you see tears that, again, flood the bed. You see it all. And I read that book and I thought, oh my gosh, that's how we really are supposed to come before the Lord. We can bring our anger, we can bring our hurt, we can bring our despair. And experiencing all those things actually doesn't make us a bad Christian. It makes us human.
Did you find yourself, after reading that, starting to pray those kind of prayers?
Yeah, and I journaled them a lot.
Oh, you would journal your prayers?
I would pray them, but I would also journal them. I had so much stuff stuffed inside of me that I didn't even know was there. And it was like unlocking a box, and then it just kept pouring out. So for me, journaling my prayers was the best way. There's something about writing that connects my head and my heart. And so I found that I did that. But yes, it unlocked something.
You know, the first journaler of prayers was actually King David. And so you mentioned the Psalms of Lament. The psalm that we were looking at today is Psalm 6, which is all about David writing down his frustrations, his question. He asks a question of God, but you, O Lord, how long? I can imagine that came out of, just frustration that, God, I know that you're my God, but why aren't you saving me? Why is this taking so long? And that honest expression is just right there with the journaling prayers of David.
Yeah, I've definitely certainly come to understand and appreciate David. His transparency, his authenticity, and behind it all. Mm-hmm. And I think this is what I found with myself is that there's also a lot of fervor. There is a passion for the Lord. And so there's incredible freedom. And I actually remember you saying to me many, many years ago that sadness and joy are really the flip side of the same coin. And if we don't experience the sorrows and the sadness of life honestly and authentically, we can't experience the joys of sorrow. And I feel like that's what David encapsulates in all of his writings and his very life.
Yeah, he was fully human, and he allowed his emotions to be part of his relationship with God. I think when we stuff our emotions and we're not honest and bring those before the Lord, we actually end up becoming pretty hard-hearted. And we lose our joy. We lose the other side of emotion because we've cut off half of them.
Yeah. Well, I call that survival.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say, and again, this is, this is learned out of my own experience, is that I knew how to survive. I did not know how to thrive. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I was willing to take all those coverings off of my heart, the hard-heartedness that kept me safe, and allow my heart to be broken, that I could actually move into learning what it meant to thrive, or what I love to call, that abundant life. Mm-hmm. The Lord calls it the abundant life. I just pursue that abundant life.
Well, and David actually makes the movement of that in this psalm. He starts angry at God, and then he moves to sadness before God and that vulnerability. And then the next step that he takes is actually he starts to become bold in God and starts casting out his enemies. He tells his enemy, "Depart from me, and you workers of evil," is what he calls them. And it's fascinating that you have become a person in your honest prayers and wrestling with God, a person who's very much into healing ministry. Mm-hmm. And, we have invisible enemies, not just the material ones, people that maybe give us a hard time, but we have things like disease and spiritual oppression. And it's actually out of that place of vulnerability before God that we actually do become empowered for healing, isn't it?
Most definitely. And I'd say actually, so some of the greatest invisible, opponents are the very lies that we believe. Mm-hmm. Every time we experience trauma, loss, pain, the enemy loves to come in and plant a lie. Mm-hmm. You've done something wrong. This is your fault. You're broken. You're irreparable. You're beyond healing. You're beyond forgiveness. And it's those lies that hold us captive.
Right.
And what happens is those lies, I see it as kind of like a cancer. They just start to grow and surround our hearts in this protective shield until the light is able to be, until the light shines into those lies. It's just that light breaking into the darkness. Yeah. And when the light breaks into the darkness starts to lose its hold. Well, healing to me is that picture of light coming into the darkness. And I think a lot of times we need help with that. I think that,
Absolutely.
The laments are a great way to start, and that being honest with the Lord. But then I think a lot of times we need people to come alongside of us and to help us.
A strong, mature Christian, maybe your pastor, but it could be just a Christian friend that is empathetic. And, there are some people that give platitudes that try to just make themselves feel better by saying something that's pithy or God's got this, or you've got the victory. But an honest friend that's willing to go to those darker places with you can be really helpful to unlock through being a fellow journey person.
Yeah, and I think that, they don't just want to make themselves feel better when they say those things. I think that we all say those kind of things. Mm-hmm. We want a quick fix for people, but the fact of the matter is that there aren't any quick fixes.
Right.
The Lord's in the business of healing, but it can be really messy. And yeah, I think for me, I mean, friends were good and you were amazing walking through a lot of my healing journey, but really, I needed healing prayer people. I really needed people who would come and fight for me in prayer and stand for me in my brokenness and keep pointing me to the Lord. I mean, I think counselors, again, pastors, friends, but yeah, someone who's just willing to get into the pit with you. And people who understand. I mean, God blessed me with just some friendships of people who were broken, and we walked through it together.
You don't really think of prayer as fighting, but it really is a powerful weapon, isn't it?
I think it's the most powerful weapon that we have as Christians is prayer.